Almost everyone who starts sewing has the same experience. You sit down with your sewing machine, excited to start a project, and 10 minutes later you're fighting with it. The thread breaks, the fabric gets eaten, the stitches look like a bird's nest, and suddenly your sewing machine feels less like a helpful tool and more like a toxic relationship. If that sounds familiar, this video is for you. Hello, I'm Estelle and I've only been sewing for about 3 years, so I'm definitely not an expert, but in a way I think that's actually helpful for you, because it wasn't long ago when I was exactly where you are, completely confused, frustrated, and convinced my sewing machine hated me. Most beginner tutorials skip steps that feel obvious to experienced sewists, but when you're new, those steps are exactly the ones you need. So in this video, I'm going to show you the very basics of using a sewing machine. And hopefully by the end of this video, your sewing machine will feel less like an enemy and more like a teammate. Before we even touch fabric, we need to set up the machine properly. This might sound obvious, but when you're a beginner, even this part can feel intimidating. First, plug the power cable on the pedal. Most machines have two separate cables, one that goes to the wall and the other that connects the pedal. The pedal controls the speed of the machine. Think of it like the gas pedal of a car. The harder you press, the faster the needle moves. I like to use the pedal without shoes to have more control over the pressure I apply. Now that all is plugged, turn the machine on. I've taught sewing classes for beginners and I had a lot of students ask where the machine wasn't working and it was not on. So go find the switch and when it's on, the light should turn on too. If you are using an old sewing machine, you might not have a light or the light bulb might be burnt out. Now, different fabrics need different needles. So here's a simple rule to remember. The universal needle is good for most beginner projects. The ballpoint or knit needle is for knit fabrics and jeans needle is for thick fabrics like denim. You will find that information on the box and in the number of the needle. I would suggest you get a pack of different needles so you can avoid the temptation to work with a wrong needle just because it's the only one you have. And if you're a beginner, have some extra because it's very common to break some needles while you're learning. If your machine is skipping stitches or struggling, sometimes the solution is simply changing the needle. It might be the wrong number or it's too old. A dull needle can cause a lot of mysterious problems. Sometimes the issue comes because the needle is set in reverse. Note that it has a flat side and a rounded side. You must insert the needle with the rounded side facing you. To install a new needle, face the rounded side towards you, insert here again, and screw until it's secure. When I was learning how to sew, I could not understand why I was making such a mess under the fabric. It looked like a bird nest under there, and I found that the reason behind that was either that the needle was with a flat side facing me, or that the bobbin was also set wrong. If you don't know what the bobbin is, it's the lower thread of your sewing machine. On my machine I can see it from above, but yours might be right here in front. I brought my old sewing machine so I can show you different cases. What most people don't know is that the bobbin has to go in a specific direction, and it can change depending on the machine. If set wrong, your stitches will probably make a mess. I'm going to show you how to set it up right in a minute, but first I'm going to show you how to wind the bobbin. Place your thread spool on the spool pin. Then follow your machine's winding path and take an empty bobbin. Pass the thread through this hole here from the inside to the outside. Place the bobbin on the bobbin winder and push it to the side to activate the winding mechanism. I'm going to hold on this thread for a little bit more and press the pedal slowly. The bobbin will start filling with thread. I will softly hold the thread until it naturally becomes too short. You can stop when the machine makes a little sound or until you see the bobbin is touching the little thingy here. It should look smooth and evenly wound. Now cut the thread and remove the bobbin like this. Open the bobbin case and see that most machines have instructions on how to insert the bobbin. Most tutorials say the bobbin thread has to point clockwise, but be careful, that's not the case for every sewing machine. In my machine, the thread should point to the left and then pass the thread following the direction of the drawing here. Usually, when you drop the bobbin from above, the thread's direction when you pull is to the left. Let me show you again slower. The end of the thread points to the left, we drop the bobbin inside, then we grab the thread and there's a specific path we must follow. First, we pull to the right so it can go through this structure here and pull again to the left. And we leave it like this for now. This is called a drop-in bobbin, but there are also vertical load bobbins, which work the opposite way. Let me show you with my older sewing machine. Here we have our bobbin, and also this metal case you have to take out too. We prepare the bobbin like this, with the thread pointing to the right. Insert into the case and pull the thread like this so it gets between these lashes, making sure the thread can be pulled and it's not stuck. You can now insert this with this hook thingy pointing upwards so that it aligns with the hole in the machine. Press until you hear a click. I like to keep this open until I finish threading the machine. What's important to understand here is that even if you think you know how to wind the bobbin, make sure you do it exactly according to your machine's instructions, because there are different models than the ones I've shown you. You can find the bobbin winding direction if there's a drawing next to it, or by looking in your machine's manual. Now we thread the top thread. Raise the presser foot before threading. This step is often skipped in tutorials, but it's actually helpful. When the presser foot is raised, the tension discs open and allow the thread to sit correctly. Now follow the threading path on your machine. Don't forget the little thing here. To make it easier, hold the thread like this. It's going to be easier than trying to thread it. So hold the end with your right hand and a few centimeters to the left, apply some tension. This will allow to make this movement and it's ready to thread from the front to the back and left. Every machine is different, but it usually goes like this, from the spool touching this round thing, down a guide, around the tension discs, up through the take-up lever and down toward the needle. See here that it might be difficult for you to thread the last step if you can't see the hook hiding in there, so it's better to turn the side wheel until the hook appears and then pass the thread, making sure it sits right. Finally, thread the needle from front to back and leave a small thread tail to the left side. This is quite important to avoid unthreading in the first stitch. Finally, we are going to take the bobbin thread up. With my left hand, I grab the thread from the needle. Gently, you don't have to pull. My machine has a button here to automatically get the needle up and down, but here's how you do it by hand. Go find this wheel here on the side and always turn it towards you. With a whole loop, the bobbin thread should appear here. I grab that thread and pull both threads to the left, long enough so the machine doesn't lose them in the first stitch. Now I close the bobbin case and it's ready to sew. Remember to put the foot down if you're starting to sew. It's very common to forget to put it down again and that will make a mess. So the machine is almost ready to sew, but depending on the project we are working on, we should also set the length, width and tension. The length is how long you want your stitches to be. 90% of the time I use 2.5 or 3, but if I'm working on delicate fabrics or on a curve, I might go on a lower number like 2 or 1, or higher for thick materials like towels or a quilt. This one here allows you to change the stitch pattern. In a basic sewing machine, you can choose between straight stitch, zigzag or buttonhole settings. You can leave it to 0 or in this case letter A if you are making a running stitch. I usually only touch this to make a zigzag stitch. In this sewing machine, that's letter C. You should have a legend somewhere with this information. If you have this particular sewing machine, even though it says zigzag here, this is the reverse button, not the zigzag button. In modern sewing machines, you can choose the stitches and control the space between them with this screen. Finally, the tension controls how the top thread and bottom thread meet in the middle of the fabric. If the tension is correct, the stitches will look balanced on both sides. Most of the time you will comfortably sew around tension 3 to 5, but you might need to change it for special fabrics. Since I don't know from memory the tension for very light or very chunky fabrics, what I do is Google what tension is recommended for my project. Generally, you will use a lower number for fine or delicate fabrics and a high number for thick or heavy fabrics. Be aware that if you are sewing a very thick fabric, your regular foot might not be the best. For that kind of project, like quilting or making blankets or coats, it's very useful to use this foot instead. It's called a walking foot. I will leave you a link for it in the description. Now we could actually start sewing, but wait! Before we even start sewing, there's something that can make your life much easier or much harder as a beginner, and that's the fabric you choose. Whatever fabric you're using, it's recommended to always wash and dry your fabric before cutting and sewing, because you might make a splendid linen top and after washing it for the first time, it won't fit you anymore or the seams will look funny. I know it's very boring to have to wait for this step, but if you plan it with time or wash the fabrics you bought as soon as you get home, it will make your finished piece much better. When you're starting out, it's a good idea to avoid very stretchy or elastic fabrics. I've been sewing for 3 years and I'm still hesitant to use stretch fabric. I've used some because I reuse a lot of clothes instead of buying new fabric, and it always gives me problems and the fabric ends up misshapen. So if you're just starting out, I would recommend you avoid this fabric. You can choose a stiff cotton or linen to begin with. Very viscous fabric like silk are also difficult at first because they are too slippery. Don't let the first time you make a specific project, especially one that stretches your current abilities, be the time you expect to make the final finished piece. It's completely normal if it's not a success at first. I recommend you start by using old bedsheets instead of buying a cute expensive fabric, because that will add the fear of ruining the fabric, and that fear will block you and make you not enjoy the project. Another thing beginners sometimes forget is to add the seam allowance. Most patterns include extra fabric around the edges that is meant to be sewn inside the seam. If you cut exactly on the stitching line, the piece will end up smaller than it should be. So if you're trying to replicate a garment you have, you will have to trace it and then add half or 1 centimeter of seam allowance on each side. One thing I was very stubborn about when I started, and that I've seen in my students too, is that we try to sew as close to the edge as possible, as if that were better and more skilled or something. It's the opposite. I don't know why we have that tendency, but sewing too close to the edge will make the garment too big because you've used fewer centimeters than the seam allowance, or the seam will easily turn outwards, leaving you with a hole to mend later. Also, such a small seam doesn't allow for proper ironing, so always add a minimum of half a centimeter, which is exactly the size of this tab on the presser foot. I usually align the edge of the fabric with the edge of the presser foot. That way, it's easier for me to make a straight line while respecting the seam allowance. One last note about the fabric that will make more difference than you think: the direction in which you cut your fabric matters. Fabric has a natural direction called the grain. When you cut your pieces, try to align them with the straight grain of the fabric, usually parallel to the selvage edge. If pieces are cut off grain, garments can twist or hang strangely. If you take a piece of fabric and pull in different directions, you will see that it stays in place or it stretches a lot. When it stretches a lot, that's the direction you want when you need to cut on the bias, normally for bias binding or flowy skirts. This makes a big difference on how the finished piece behaves, but if you're just practicing, I wouldn't worry too much about that for now. If you're not sure where to buy fabrics, I've left a couple recommendations in the description. This isn't sponsored. A lot of you asked me for fabric sources, so I did some research and I found 2 brands that align with my values around sustainability and social responsibility. One is based in Canada and the other in Europe, so you can choose what's closest to you. I reached out to them and they kindly sent me some fabrics to try, and also offered discount codes for you. I hope that's helpful. And don't hesitate to recommend other brands in the comments section. I'd love to know more options. Now let's finally make our first seam. I'm using all stained pants for practice. I recommend you practice with a fabric like this first. Let's say I have to sew this edge together. I would normally pin or baste it in place first. And then place the fabric under the presser foot. And very important, make sure you lower the presser foot. I recommend you work on your seams, leaving the full piece of the fabric to the outside, so it has space to move. If you do it in reverse, it can get very annoying to move the fabric because it doesn't fit. Now, to start, I always hold the thread tail behind the fabric to prevent the machine from swallowing it or making tangles. Press the pedal gently and guide the fabric with your hands. At the start of a seam, you always make a back stitch to secure it, except if your intention is to make others. Most machines have a button for it, but they are usually placed in different spots. Try to find a button with this symbol. These make stitches in the opposite direction, and with a couple of stitches it's okay to secure it. Then unpress the button and press the pedal again to sew normal. While sewing, your hands are not pulling the fabric, they are just guiding it. This is very important. Notice that I'm only caressing the fabric. The machine has feed dogs that move the fabrics toward you. At the end of a seam, you want to make a back stitch again so they don't unravel. You can go to the full edge of the fabric, that's alright. Then lift the presser foot and pull the fabric out. I like to cut the threads long enough so it's ready for the next seam. You want to make the seam on the inside of the garment, so you get this on the wrong side and this on the right side. Also, once you finish a seam, you should press it with the iron. There are a lot of opinions on how to iron the seams, but I was taught to open them and give it a soft press, and then iron again to the side so I can easily make the zigzag stitch on the edge. Now I'm going to show you how to make the zigzag stitch. Here you have a lot of different stitches. You might only use the running stitch and the zigzag stitch. The zigzag stitch can be used to finish raw edges or attach applique. To switch to zigzag, change the stitch selector on your machine. Here's a reminder on how to set this stitch in the other machine. You can usually adjust 2 things: width, how wide the zigzag is, and length, how far apart the stitches are. I almost always use the standard settings, but try experimenting on a scrap piece of fabric first. Testing stitches before starting a project is a great habit that will save you a lot of frustration. The zigzag stitch also needs to be secured with the back stitch, and it should grab part of the seam allowance and go to the very edge of the fabric, like so. If you are still here, you've learned so much already, I'm so proud of you. I'm going to give you a couple more tips to help you get better results, and if you have more doubts, leave a comment and I will try to help you or make another video. A habit that will instantly improve your sewing is pressing your seams and fabric. I know most of you hate to iron your clothes, and you don't want to stop sewing when you're in the frenzy of wanting to finish a garment. But ironing makes all the difference between a piece that clearly looks handmade and rushed and one that makes people say, "What a beautiful top, where did you buy it?" After sewing a seam, take a moment to press it with an iron. It only takes a few seconds and it feels very calming and meditative to me. It helps the stitches settle into the fabric and makes everything look much cleaner and more professional. But I don't want you to worry so much about your garments looking professional. The goal here is to learn and have fun. I'm still very proud of some garments I made. even though I can clearly see the beginner mistakes I made in them. Sewing is one of those skills where mistakes are not just normal, they are actually part of the learning process. I still make mistakes all the time, and I bet seamstress with 30 years of experience makes mistakes too. Sometimes pieces are upside down, sometimes we forget a step, or we have to unpick an entire seam, and that's completely okay. To keep this video from getting too long, I left out a few extra tips, but what you've learned here should already help you to avoid thread tangles and fighting with your sewing machine. It doesn't hate you, it just needs the right settings. And even when you make everything right, the machine will randomly have a day when it doesn't want to behave, no matter what you do. I've learned that when that happens, it's actually a reflection of my mood or concentration level. It's not the machine, it's me. So it's best to leave it for another day when I'm in a better mood. Of course, it can happen that is the sewing machine problem. I learned how to sew with an old sewing machine, and eventually I had to get a new one, and that made the sewing experience much more pleasant. If your sewing machine has ever made you feel like you're doing everything wrong, I promise you're not alone. Sewing machines can feel complicated at first, but once you understand the basics, they become much more predictable. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like, and tell me in the comments what's the most frustrating thing your sewing machine has done to you. Keep on going, I know you can make this. If you want more inspiration and tips, you can watch this playlist where I share my learnings as a beginner. And to learn how to clean and maintain your sewing machine, you can watch this video next. See you there, adeu!